Hello, you guys, and welcome to this week's podcast episode. It is another guest episode this week. It has been, 3 episodes since the last one, and I am joined by Gaby Mendes. Now, Gaby is the founder and CEO of Talktwenties, and if you don't know what that is or you've never heard of this podcast, it's literally, oh my god, it's amazing. She has created a community of 20-somethings, and she is just here to talk about all of the things that we do not get taught in our 20s. So if you head over to her podcast, she talks about finances, mortgages, confidence, self-esteem, savings, literally all of the things that we don't get taught. So it's an incredible community, it's an incredible podcast that she has created, and it's actually an award-winning podcast, so it's amazing. And our podcasts are quite similar, which is interesting because obviously mine's called Little Girls Aren't Taught This. And my, why for creating this podcast was, again, all about us learning the things that we didn't get taught as little girls that would have helped us so much on our evolution, that would have helped us so much when we were becoming the women who we are today. And Gaby has the same message for her podcast, and it's obviously just based around all of the topics that we should have been taught in school. And she is a former teacher turned entrepreneur. So I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. It was a pleasure to talk to Gaby. She is amazing. She is so funny. She is so knowledgeable. And yeah, if you enjoy it, please leave us a tag. Please share on Instagram. Please leave us a written review. I say us, me. Because, I appreciate it so much. So I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. And I shall see you next week for the next episode. Have a gorgeous week. I see you. I love you. Thank you for being here. Mwah. So welcome, Gaby. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I know it's been a bit of reorganizing to get this in the diary, but I'm so excited to chat with you because I feel like we've got so much in common and feel like it's going to be an exciting conversation.
I know, I'm actually really interested as well, because I feel like the ethos of everything that Talk20s is about, it's about the life skills. But when I've listened to episodes and when I've listened to you talk about it, you say, one of the things that you say is like all of these things that we're not taught. And obviously this podcast is called Little Girls Aren't Taught This. So it's really about, it just feels like there's so much that we miss out on that I feel like if we were educated on, our lives would be so much different.
I totally agree. I think there's so many life skills and just things that people didn't even realize were needed in adult life. There's so many things that have crept up on me that I've suddenly went, a lesson on this in school would have been super helpful. That, when you're going through life, you kind of just, I look at life as like a journey of like exploration. So you are constantly exploring new things, learning new things, and trying to get closer to that person that you kind of feel like you want to be. And for me, I do think that like a lot of that would have been made easier if I'd had some key lessons in school, whether that be finances, whether that be career related, whether that be wellness, mental health, but even like fun stuff, like enjoyment, adventure. I guess it's taught very, very young. And then you get to your GCSE age and all of that element of fun and adventure and all of that kind of stuff kind of seems to go out the window. So yeah, it's don't even get me started on the education systems in the UK, because I could probably do a whole podcast just on that alone.
Yeah, I know. So give us some back, because that's interesting, because I know you was a teacher before you actually come into doing the Talk20s. So give us a little bit of background about like who you are and how have you got to the point that you are at now.
Yeah, totally. So I went to university and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I think there's a lot of people out there who could relate. And I knew that I wanted to go to university, but I wanted to keep my options open. So I found a course that was called like Children, Citizens and Education. It was at University of Birmingham. And I was like, this sounds great. It's all about learning. It's all about culture. It's all about how we grow, probably like the whole topic of your podcast, to be honest. And it was a really, really interesting course. And I thought it looks really varied. You did a little bit of psychology, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of history. And it was kind of like, let's keep my options open. So I applied for the course and then I got a letter through to say, we're changing the title of the course and it's just going to be called BA Education. So basically it looked like to everyone else, the content of the course remained the same, but it looked like to everyone else, I had just gone and done a 3-year degree in education, and everyone just thought that I was just destined to be a teacher, and that was like the only thing that I wanted to do. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of people who study education studies out there, or this kind of subject at university. Like everyone just says, oh, you must be interested in being a teacher, but there are so many more options other than that. So I kind of got to the end of my degree. A lot of my course had already kind of come into the idea that like, okay, maybe we weren't going to be teachers at first, but now we're all going to go be teachers. There was quite a high percentage that went on into that, or some went into higher education and stuff. And I panicked. I absolutely panicked when I got to the end of my degree. I was really badly struggling with anxiety. And I just, this uncertainty of what I was going to do with my life. I wasn't sure that teaching was right for me. But I didn't really know my course didn't really equip me to know that there was other things I could do. So I did. I went on and did my teacher training. I went and taught in a secondary school for 2 years, and I taught French, actually. My dad's French, so that helped a lot. So I went and taught French in a secondary school. And whilst I was in my second year of teaching, bearing in mind, I absolutely hated it. I really did not enjoy it. But whilst I was in my second year, I was given a form of sixth form students. Now, I was about 21, 22 at this time. My sixth form students were about 17, 18. So there's hardly any difference in age between us. It was kind of, nothing. And I felt, man, the imposter syndrome was crazy. But I literally put on my smartest. So I tried to look as old as I possibly could. Like I was genuinely walking around school in like the granniest clothes you've ever seen, just because I didn't want to be seen as like a sixth former or a student or whatever. And I tried my best to support these students, and they just ended up asking me, like, Miss, like, how do I get, like, what's a debit card and what's a credit card? What's the difference? How do I go about renting? I'm really struggling with my mental health. What should I do? Well, I don't know what career options should I take? Should I do an apprenticeship? Should I go to university? Like, there were just so many life questions. And I was like, none of these are answered in school. It's like, go do your 3A levels. And that's pretty much it. There isn't, there's an element of pastoral support, which is what I was doing for them as a sixth form teacher, but there was just nothing. And I knew that once I'd left university, it was an abyss. That was literally nothing there. So this idea like started to be formed, but I had to get out of the education system. It just really wasn't. It was like a square peg, round hole. I just really didn't fit. Was super, super creative. Also had quite a business head on my shoulders, despite the fact that I'd kind of done an education degree and a kind of humanities degree. I actually had quite a business head on my shoulders. And so just decided that it wasn't right. And now, obviously, my family were like, what the hell are you doing? Leaving a profession, that's very well respected. And but I took the plunge and I quit my job as a teacher. And I managed to find a temp role in events and then secure a full-time role in events shortly after that. And I started to grow my understanding of the business world. I worked in business events. And it was here that kind of Talk20s idea was formed. So initially, I wanted Talk20s to be like a big life skills event. Like I wasn't necessarily intending for it to be a podcast, but I launched in January 2020. And obviously we all know what happened by March 2020. So it wasn't possible to do in-person events. And I was like, I'm still so passionate about this, and it doesn't have to be done in an event format. So how can I do it differently? And that's when we launched the podcast. And we're 60 episodes in, nominated for a British Podcast Award, over 30,000 listeners. So yeah, it's going really, really well. I think that for me, all of that kind of means nothing. It's the messages I get where people say, this podcast has genuinely changed my life, or you made me feel like I was accepted, like I wasn't going through this alone. That means more to me than anything that we do. So that's kind of the backstory of Talk20s through my own kind of discovery of what it's like to be a 20-something, feeling totally confused, not knowing where you're going, and creating a community around that.
I absolutely love that story, because like so much of it is so similar to my story, like going to university and going through the motions. And then I was working for the probation, and I remember when I got that job and my whole family were like, even going to university, I was the first in my family, so it was like a big deal. And then it was a big deal when I landed the probation job. And I remember walking in and all my family was sitting around the table, and I was like, I'm gonna quit my job. And they just were like, why would you do that? Like, you are so stupid, like this is what you studied for. And I was like, it's just not making me feel good. And nobody understood. Nobody gets that it's okay for us to not want to be in something that really makes us feel like shit. Like, actually, it's okay for us to say, you know what? I haven't got a clue what's about to come, but I just know that how I'm waking up and feeling every single day, I don't want to continue to live like that for the rest of my life, which I think is sad, because a lot of people do, because the fear comes in and the options that there's nothing else out there for them.
Yeah, totally. I think it's the fear thing. I think it's the fear of what other people think, but then also the fear that the grass isn't greener. I think that's a big, that was a worry for me. I was like, what if this is just adult life and I just don't like adult life altogether? What if it's not just this job? What if it's the next job's just as bad? And I think genuinely that was a fear that kind of consumed me as well. And like, also, like, what if no one wants to kind of take me on? Like, what if no one believes that I can use these teachers have such transferable skills. I'm sure you did from your job. So many teachers think they can't work in any other like institution or business or organization because they think that their skills are only, I don't know where this kind of picture comes from, but I've been working closely with someone else who's leaving the education system, just offering a bit of mentorship and support at the moment. She's genuinely like, I don't know how I have transferable skills. Teachers have the most transferable skills in the world. I would not be able to do the current job I have. I would not be able to run the current business I have if I hadn't had my teaching background. So even though I absolutely hated those 2 years of my life, they made me the person that I am. They've given me the skills that I have, and they're absolutely crucial. So I think when you're looking at career change, it's also about looking at going, actually, like, I know that I can use these skills in a different kind of way. Like, not every single set of skills you learn are really specific to one job, and quite often they're really helpful or useful in another job as well. So I think there's so much fear around it, and once you break through that, then it can feel really rewarding, but it's an uphill climb, definitely.
Yeah, and there's two things. The fear is something that I want to go into a little bit more, because I know that's definitely something you've just spoke about it. We can unravel a little bit more. But that second thing about transferable skills is so important, because I remember transitioning into becoming a coach, and I had this like imposter syndrome because I didn't have a coaching qualification. And then the more I like worked with clients and like really stepped into my truth, I realized that I've got like such a different perspective than a lot of coaches, because I've worked for like 6 years with high risk like trauma situations. So there's where the skills come from. So it doesn't matter if I don't have a qualification. And I think some people get caught up in that, oh, I don't have a qualification and I don't do this, so that means I can't do that. And I just say, like, stop thinking about the logistics of it. And it comes back to what you've just said, unpack what your skills are and how they relate to other areas. That's so important. And that's one of the things I think really, really like helps you navigate that fear, or navigate the sense of, well, what if it doesn't go to plan?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think when we make reference to the coaching world there, it's an unregulated industry. So there's this fear around, well, what is the right way to go? I think when things are so clear and linear, like accountancy, for example, you do your tests, it's very, very clear, and at the end you qualify as an accountant. But coaching is much more open-ended. You know, you can be a coach in anything. And I think so for a lot of people, there is a nervousness around that, because they're like, well, am I doing it right? Because there is no actual right way to do it, because of the kind of industry that it is. And I think there's definitely a fear in that as well, because when, like, especially for me now, there's no right way to be an entrepreneur. There's no right way to, even like a business course or an MBA is not going to help me that much at this point, because I'm learning through doing, and I'm learning through based off the skills that I have and the situation that my business is in. Like you say, sometimes extra qualifications don't actually add that much to the situation. And actually, sometimes it's just better to throw yourself in the deep end and go, well, I'm going to give it a go, because there's so much you can learn just through doing.
Yeah. And I heard a quote once as well, and it said, failure is the tuition we pay for the skills that we don't know. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because it was so relatable, because we pay thousands of pounds in tuition fees, don't we, and all of these things. And then actually, when you're just thrown into the world of business, you're like so afraid sometimes of failing. But actually, that failure is it's so rich in experience and knowledge. And when I heard that quote, I was like, wow, yeah, I will happily pay that tuition, because it's the things that I need to learn. So going back to the fear, How did you find the courage? Because it does feel like it's courage to quit that stable job, the expectations from everybody around you, the expectations that's what you were going to do. How was that process for you?
In a word, tough, I think. It's not an easy process, but one thing I will say is it's got easier. So it's not the first career change I've had. Obviously, I left teaching to move into events, and then I quit my events job to be a full-time entrepreneur. And the second time felt a hell of a lot easier. The first one, it was mainly deep rooted in the fact that I knew that I was kind of, it sounds so cheesy and I hate saying this, but like meant for more. Now, that doesn't mean to say that teachers are anything less, or I wasn't, doing good as a teacher, or teachers, there's nothing wrong with being a teacher, but I knew that I wasn't reaching my fullest potential. Potentially, even the subject I was teaching, I wasn't massively passionate about languages. Like, maybe I would have, if I had been passionate about languages, maybe that would have been my choice at university, but it really wasn't. So I knew that like I wasn't in a place where I could be 100% giving the best to the world for me. Like, yes, I have language skills, but is that the best thing that I should be doing right now? No, there's so much more to what I was doing. And it was this kind of, emptiness and sadness that I was like, I just don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I think it was trying to push the fear aside of what, my parents, my family, my friends would say, and just really focus on, this is right for me. On a previous podcast that I recorded with a psychotherapist, she mentioned to me something that resonated and has stayed with me throughout all of my podcast recordings. And it was, the closer we are to our ideal self, the happier we feel in terms of our well-being. Now, when I was a teacher, I didn't identify myself as a teacher. I was saying to you at the beginning, I was obviously a 21-year-old living. I felt like I was genuinely living in like a 40-year-old's body, because I had to make myself look so much older in the school setting to have any kind of respect, to keep a level of boundaries between students and stuff like that, that I didn't feel like, I didn't want to be the young, cool teacher, because I just thought no one's going to respect me, So it was really, really tough. But I knew that like, my identity wasn't that. Like, it used to really annoy me. I have younger brothers and sisters, they were all like school age, and they used to be like, oh, Miss Mendes, and say like stuff like that to me, and I'd be like, oh my god, like this is just not who I am. And so for me, I was like, it felt like when I left, it was like an element of like freedom, like, okay, I can find who I'm supposed to be, I can get a little bit closer to who I'm supposed to be. And again, that took time, a couple of jobs working in events. I thought I'd found it in events. And then I was like, I've got a business in me. So, yeah.
I know about that. So obviously I'm like 5 months off from being a qualified psychotherapist. So we learn a lot around the ideal self and this notion of like self-actualizing. And it is so true that that even though we're in such a space of uncertainty, and for a lot of people, a lot of the time when you're trying to get closer to that ideal self and you're trying to really self-actualize, and for people listening, like what self-actualization means is, well, actually it can mean different things in different schools of psychology, but what it basically means is like you being that best version of yourself, and like you have hierarchy of needs that need to be met. So the basic ones like food, water, warmth, shelter, all of that type of stuff. And as we progress up the hierarchy of needs, like when you get to the top in terms of the actualization, it's you're living into the things and doing the things that truly make you happy and make you feel good. And I think thinking back to my time working in an office and being like 9 to 5 and having my weekends dictated to me and what I earned, like I was exactly the same as you. Like I just always knew that I didn't fit into that. And even when I left and there was so much uncertainty, it was like a fog was lifted. And I was like, I just feel so much more myself. Like that anxiety, that just like that, it just zaps like that zest for life, doesn't it? It's just so like to be stuck in that cycle is really difficult. And I think for a lot of people, understanding about the ideal self and like following your dreams and stuff, like yeah, it can sound a little bit cheesy if you hear people talk about it on Instagram, but there's actually like there's so much knowledge underpinning that, and it is so true. Like, it's so true.
I totally agree. And like I'd say, like with these changes, and I'm not telling everyone to quit their job and go and do whatever it is they want to do. Like, but with these changes, I used to suffer so bad with anxiety. Like, it was crippling. Like, it was really, really, really hard to even get out of bed some days. You know, every single thing used to feel like a mountain to climb, like going to the shops. Like, it was ridiculous. It was crazy. And I'd go as far as to say I have little to no anxiety anymore. I just don't, it's just not something that even comes into my brain anymore. You know, we're talking, you know, a good 4 years on. But I think through doing something that truly I feel called to do has meant that, like, there is no anxiety around whether I'm doing it right, because there is no right way. I'm carving out my own path. And I think when I was trying to fit myself into what I thought a teacher should look like and how a teacher should be, and like mold myself into a shape that really wasn't who I felt like I was, maybe there was some element of like that brought up quite a lot of uncomfortable feelings and emotions. But yeah, so for me, it's not only helped, you know, me feel more fulfilled in what I'm doing, but it's also massively taken a burden off my mental health at the same time.
Yeah, because it's about that personal potential, isn't it? And like the psychological development. And if you're in an understimulated environment, well, then where is that sense of development? But also, like, people listening to this, exactly what you've just said, it's not that everybody has to wake up tomorrow and quit their jobs and be like, I'm just going to go out and build a business. There's ways that you can really bring this element of joy and happiness and freedom into your life while still doing something. So that could be you go down to part-time hours, you have a hobby that you give yourself X amount of hours a week doing. You really just bring things into your life that make you feel good. And I think sometimes people get a little overwhelmed and think, well, especially if you listen to stories like ours, a lot of people, it is that point of, I quit my job and I realized I wanted more. And that's not the story for everybody. And that's also totally okay. It's about how you can work towards that self-actualization and that ideal self in a way that works for you and makes you feel good.
Totally. And I think, you know, I was offered different roles. I was offered, you know, I was doing some drama stuff in the school that I was working in, and I could have switched roles, and there was a drama position that came up, and I could have seen my life maybe going down that path, and maybe I would have got closer to the person that I really wanted to be, working in a different kind of subject that I probably felt more aligned to. And don't get me wrong, drama jobs, they're hard to get in the UK. There's thousands of people that train to be drama teachers and like struggle to get a job. So I felt like even probably worse turning down that position to stay on and move into drama than I actually did just leaving altogether. Because I knew how how much of a privilege it was to have an opportunity like that. So I feel like I could have found it potentially in the education system, but it just wasn't the route that I ended up taking. And I decided to kind of step out into the big wide world of corporate. And then after a couple of years, found my own business. So yeah.
So why then life skills?
So like I mentioned, obviously with the students that I was teaching, there was just so much that they weren't aware of and that I wasn't aware of. So I was 21, 22, and I didn't know some of the answers to the questions they were asking me, but I am like a lifelong learner. I fully believe that you like every day is a school day. I am like fully behind that motto. And I learned something. I am fascinated with learning. So for example, we put something up on Instagram yesterday, and someone asked a question about the graph that we had used. And we'd copied it from a reliable, credible source, but they had some questions about the reliability of the graph. And what I've actually done this morning, instead of replying to emails or doing anything else, is actually go and research more about the terminology and what they use in the graph, so that I can effectively explain it to someone. It was correct what we used, but how could I explain that to someone in a way that they understood? Whereas them looking at this graph, they didn't understand it. How could I go in, do more research, learn about it myself to then offer that advice onwards. For me, that's life skills. That's going out, learning, finding out more about something, and to improve your life in some way. It now means that I better understand the financial system, because it was all finance and graphs and stuff like that. But I think if we are equipped with the things that actually help us in life moving forwards, then we can actually get further. So for example, dealing with finance and dealing with money, quite often it's something that people from lower income families potentially struggle with. Their parents maybe don't have as good financial skills, and they're not passing this onwards. Perhaps they're also not being taught in those schools how to handle money correctly. I saw a crazy thing on TikTok once where it was like a private school had taught their students to everyone's come in with £1, and it was all about how they could like use this pound to create more money, and it was about investing it in different places. I'd have loved that activity as a kid in like a state primary school. We never did that activity. So I do think it's like attitudes and stuff like that gets passed on through generations. But I also think that if you are a genuine learner, that you can teach these things yourself. If you want to learn these skills, so much of what I've taught myself, my parents don't even know, and they never had conversations with me about, but I know that I've gone away and taught myself how to do that. And I do think that like the more that I've equipped myself with life skills, probably the better I felt in my 20s in general. So it's really for me, I think life skills is just crucial, and it can help upskill wherever you are in life. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Recently as well, I was saying to my boyfriend, one of the things that I'm very committed to doing is learning about finances, because I want to be a woman who can sit at a table with a group of men and discuss stocks and finances. And considering I'm going into the business world for a long time, I was just like, I don't know. And then I fell into this trap being like, Luke, you sort it, because I don't know. And then I don't know why, but like all of a sudden it hit me, and it was like, Lydia, you should be able to sit at that table and you should be able to hold that conversation about anything that these men are talking about. And I say men because I think the realization came up because obviously if we think about life skills and the things that we're not taught, 20s, I know for me, my 20s have been chaos in terms of unlearning everything that I've learned, especially when I transitioned into my late 20s, because I feel like, I don't know why, but I just passed the threshold of being like 26, and I just feel like you morph into a different kind of person. And not knowing life skills, but then also not knowing about periods and sex and sexuality and all of these other things that we're not taught as women. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much that we're not taught. And it can be overwhelming, but imagine we were taught these things. I said that before we started recording. Imagine we were taught these things when we were growing up. Money, finances, period, sex, all of this stuff. It would just make such a difference.
Definitely. I think there's more to be learned in school on this topic. Absolutely. But I also think don't you think it's tough to find this information as an adult? Like, where do we really go for these reliable sources? That's what I'm all about creating with Talktwenties, because you can probably find pockets of it, some useful resources on specific subjects. It's really hard to find a source that is reliable. And we aim to always be reliable. That kind of can teach you a breadth of stuff. It's kind of like, I want to learn about finances or specifically investing. I could go off and follow this Instagram account here. And then you end up following loads of different things, and it can feel quite overwhelming and quite bombarding. But yeah, like I think there's more that can be done in school, life skills wise, PSHE wise, sex education wise. Much more can be done. 100%.
Yeah, and it's even like mortgages and just like, it's really overwhelming. And it is quite bizarre that we just transition into adults and then it's like, okay, figured it out. But it's like, how do you figure that out without losing like a lot of money or making bad investments or go and do like lots of hard lessons? And then also it kind of takes like a certain person to go through these things and really use that or see a lesson. Not everybody will go through the struggles in the 20s and think like, okay, what was the lesson in that? What can I learn from that?
It's really interesting you say that, actually, because one of our questions on our podcast is, and we've actually just tweaked it ever so slightly. So we talk about a lot about adulting failures. What's the biggest, mistakes you've ever made? But we've just tweaked our question to be, what is the biggest mistake what is the biggest lesson you've ever learned that originated from making a mistake? So if anyone's listening to this podcast right now, what is the biggest lesson you've ever learned that came from failure, that came from messing up and stuff? Really, really think about that, because actually the more you think about it, the more you will actually learn about the subject, to go, okay, I learned this from it and I learned that. But maybe we're not actually tuning into this part of our brain to go, actually, that was a lesson learned. So I'm okay with that element of failure because I learned so much from it. I think it's really interesting. I don't know if you have an answer to that question, Lydia, but like, I know that, like, you know, there's so many things that I've done that I would do differently now because I feel like I've learned that lesson from getting it wrong.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something that comes to mind for me. It's like I made a lot of money last year in the space of 2 weeks. I've openly spoken about this. I made like £22,500 in literally 2 weeks off a program. And I remember that money coming in, and I made an investment. And anyway, the investment didn't work out and it was a lot of money. And I remember going to my boyfriend and sitting down, and he was like, this is the best. He was like, I'm so glad this has happened to you. He was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. And upon reflection, I've realized I had no business making that amount of money that quick, because I did not know what to do with it. I'm in a world where it's just like, you make this money and then you invest it out because that's what you do for, like, to get it back, because that's the energetics of it. And I will hand on my heart say that is the best gift I've ever been given. Did it cost me a lot and was it painful? Absolutely. But so I learned so much about finances and money and investing from it and business. And it is actually when you do fail that you get to pick yourself back up and be like, okay, what can I do different again? Because if it's going good, you don't stop to ask that question.
Definitely. And I think that's how it gets you a little bit closer to the person that you want to be. I'm in a similar position right now with the business, where I'm looking at it and I'm going, if we carry on in the way that we are with what we're doing, you know, financially, it's never going to be more than just a small business. So I'm going through this right now, and it feels like a little bit of a failure to admit that. It feels like a little bit of like defeat to go, well, if we carry on as we are, we're never going to make it to where I vision the business. But I've learned a lot, and don't get me wrong, it's felt a little bit like, you know, a little bit like a mourning, a little bit of like, you know, grief, that, you know, to come to the conclusion that potentially, you know, that isn't going to be possible unless I change up the way that I'm doing things. And I am, you know, I'm in conversations at the moment with potential investors to hopefully be able to get it to where I wanted to go. But if I hadn't looked on the situation and gone, if we carry on like this, it will never reach, it will fail in what I want it to achieve. And I had to actually say those words to me, like, it's going to fail in what I want to achieve. I'd have never switched up and gone, okay, I'm open to this opportunity and it will work in this kind of way, because I still believe in the mission. The mission's not going to change. No. I'm just taking it from a different angle. And I think that's really, really difficult for people to admit sometimes, you know, and go, okay, we're set up in this kind of way, but it's not helpful. I'm never going to have a team of however many I want working on this business. If we carry on in this business model, it won't work. And that's probably actually me being, no, I haven't hit that part yet, but that's actually me probably being super aware of, like, me going, you know, I know that failure could be on the horizon if I carry on in this way. And it doesn't matter how much you think, hope, or pray, the genuine maths is like, there ain't nothing like finances being put in you in the face and you go, oh yeah, well, that won't work. Yeah, you know, so sometimes it doesn't matter how much hoping or praying, you do have to look realistically. And the more that you're open to going, okay, that might not work, how are we going to do it so that it does work? And that might be saying, you know, changing a few things that you're really kind of holding on to really, really closely. And you might have to let a few things go. You might have to be open to other people's ideas. You might have to, you know, just be open-minded, really. But sometimes that's the best way forward. It is hard to go through this process, though.
Oh, it's so tough, especially like we were talking before I pressed record about how we've created brands that are like an extension of us, and you know, the authenticity is so important in building that trust. And I think, I know for me, social media is amazing, but sometimes it's just a shit show when I'm really going through like this process that we're talking about, because it is all that you see is people's successes and stuff, and that is actually why podcasts like Talktwenties and Diary of a CEO, like, you listen to people who have achieved their dreams and beyond, and they all talk about moments where it wasn't working. They all talk about moments where they had to take an investment or bring new people in, and then you realize, like, oh, that's the reality of business. Like, not the shiny stuff that we see on Instagram. Like, this is the reality of the world. And I think podcasts like that are so valuable, because it just grounds you in it, and it makes you realize, like,
it makes me really angry at the podcast that there are some podcasts out there like this that are like, I don't know how else to describe them, but get rich quick schemes. And they're literally like, all you got to do is have a little bit of belief and an idea, and it's going to be fine. And like,
manifest your dreams, manifest anything else. And I'm just
and I'm like, I'm manifesting all I can. That doesn't change what comes up on that piece of paper in front of me that's gone, okay, if we carry on this way, I won't be able to continue the business, or I never will be able to reach where I want it to reach. That doesn't change that. No matter how much hoping, praying, and whatever, I needed to change my strategy. That's what I actually needed to do. And I needed to be open-minded, and I need to kind of think in a different kind of way. I need to have conversations. So this process has been painful and it's been hard, and I'm still in the middle of it right now, trying to figure out what is the right path to take this forward so that it can be the business that I want it to be. I have visions that I still have visions, I'm manifestations, but that I want this to be a global brand. Like, I want it to help and support 20 somethings all over the world on a much larger scale than what we're doing at the moment. And that means that potentially I've got to step back, and I've got to allow other people, to support the platform. I've got to grow it in a way that it's not, like you say, completely tied at the hip with me. I might be the founder, I might have been the creator, but I've got to probably open that opportunity up to other people to kind of get involved. So there's so much to it than just that. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying throw your manifestations out the window and your visions, because if I didn't have that, it wouldn't be continuing at all. But it has to be that, like, you still have to ground yourself somewhere, and you still have to know that, where realistically you can actually take that. And if you can't, who can help you get it to where you need it to go?
Yeah, that's a big thing. And that's why, remember, I voice noted you a few weeks ago, and I was like, I'm just going to throw this out on a whim. Like, do you want to meet for a coffee? And because my soul was craving these kinds of conversations, because I just sit in this office, and my only form of contact a lot of the time is, which is another thing that's shifted massively since I've become self-employed. And it's really, really been a shift for, like, noticing how it impacts my mental health. My energy is being on my own a lot of the time. And it's because I was like, I just want to meet up with women who I can have these conversations with, like, because when I go into the space of, like, Instagram, I feel guilty for thinking, oh, this is, like, really hard, or like, why is this not working out? And sometimes just, like, bringing people together, and a podcast serves as that, doesn't it? Like, bringing people together who can just speak your thoughts out and be like, it's okay for you to feel this way. I just think that's huge, I just think that's so important.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. I think the power of podcasting is incredible. The power of conversation. It's open, just having these conversations with the people that I have, it's opened my mind to so many people's differing views. Like, no one in this world is 100% right. People listening to this podcast right now, they might agree with some of the things you said, they might disagree with some of the things you said. And no one is 100% right, but everyone speaks their own truth. Everyone speaks how they feel and, sees things from their view. And that might be helpful for other people to hear. And well, I like to think that on the podcast that we share as much truth as we possibly can about life in your 20s, because it's not easy. So it's important to be open about as much as possible about those things and those struggles, because like 95% of what you see online is all created.
Yeah, it is. And last question I want to ask you. What is self-love to you, and what do you think self-love would be to your listeners?
I think self-love is actually being kind to yourself. I'd have to put it that way. We put a lot of pressures on ourselves in our 20s. You need to find your right job. You need to earn a decent wage. You need to find your soulmate. You need to settle down. You need to buy your house. And none of that matters. really, unless you are happy, like the most important thing in that situation is that you yourself are happy. So I think it's about not putting those pressures on yourself and being kind to yourself and saying, actually, the most important thing in this scenario is whether I'm happy in my life and I am fulfilled and I am, waking up each day and I'm not miserable. That's the most important thing that you can do. So take these kind of society's measures of what they think success is, chuck them out the window, and actually have a real reflection of like what would make you happiest. Because I tell you now, if it's settling down with a partner that you don't really love, or you aren't really happy in that relationship just because you think society tells you that you should, that's not happiness. That's not getting you. That's not being kind to yourself. If it's sitting in a job that isn't really what you want and isn't getting you closer to the person you want to be, and you have to feel like you put on a facade, that's not happiness. So maybe look to kind of make changes there. It's just there's so many different things. If it's buying a home, a lot of people put pressure on, oh God, buy my home. You might want to try living in a few different places. You may enjoy renting, you may enjoy the freedom, you may enjoy getting to live in different places and share houses with your friends and stuff like that. Like that might suit you perfectly. So I think it's about not putting these stupid pressures on ourselves and being kind to ourselves and knowing what makes us the happiest.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And I feel like I always say it's and like sometimes I'll sit and think this, I totally understand how much of a privileged position I am in to like truly feel the way that I feel about myself, about my body, about just like who I am as a person, but not think it in an arrogant way. And for me to have found that in the midst of my like middle 20s and that really awkward stage of like 25, 26 was one of the biggest lessons I take from my life up until this point. And I know that it's not easy for everybody to get that, because like you said, there is so many pressures and so many layers and so many things that we don't know. And I think that's just why for me every single day, the same with your mission is your mission. My mission is just like this freedom that self-love brings just allows you to just stop for a moment to be like, okay, I'm doing my best. Like, how can I meet my own needs? Because you only have this life once. You don't get a rerun. This is not a practice run for another one. And we spend so much time trying to do things that other people want us to do, or trying to like have all our shit together and just like be this perfect person. And we don't need to do that. We just need to, exactly like you've just said, just be kind to ourselves and just work on being the happiest that we can be.
Yeah, exactly. And happiness to everyone is different. That's really important to remember, because I think, people might look on other people's lives and go, God, I can't believe that that makes them happy. Maybe it does. Like maybe that's happiness to them. Everyone's is different. So it's also about not judging others around us for what they're choosing their life to be as well. But I think, like you say, I'm extremely privileged to be in the situation that I am. And for anyone who's listening right now, who is kind of going through these struggles at the moment, not really knowing what direction to go in, not even know what's possible, like take a breather, be kind to yourself, and really look at deep inside about, what is the things that make me happy right now. Try and just put a little bit more of them into your life, or try and make decisions that get you that little bit closer to happiness. Yeah. And it can be tiny.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
You can find me personally on Instagram at I am Gaby Mendes, Gaby with one B and with an S instead of a Z on Mendes. And then we'll also Talktwenties on Instagram. Talktwenties spelt. A lot of people like to put it in number form, but yeah, that's us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter.
I'll link all the socials on the show notes anyway, so people can find you. So thank you so much. It's been a long time in the making, this conversation.
Definitely. And I love all your stuff, Lydia. Like, I think you are fab. You put up a post actually, and I feel like I have to bring up, you put up a post, which I think sparked this whole conversation again, just after Christmas. And it was about everyone putting out posts about exercise and losing weight, and loads of body positivity people were putting out this like banal diet and anyone who posts about diets in this time is the absolute devil. And it was actually really, because I follow a lot of those accounts, a lot of those body positivity accounts. I follow a few fitness people as well. I probably follow a handful of each. And yes, it was a very contrasting views. It was like, here's what you want to do to get fit. And here's, and if you love your body, you shouldn't want to put yourself through all of these things. But I actually fell somewhere in the middle where I was like, I actually would like to lose a little bit of weight because I know I'm feeling a little bit sluggish after Christmas. And so I absolutely love my body. There is nothing wrong with my body right now. I love everything that it can do for me right now. But would I feel a little bit better if I ate a few more greens and if I move my body a little bit more? Yes. So I'm also swaying to this side. And I could see both points of view. And it just felt like the post that you put up, which kind of explained this kind of like feelings. I mean, you can probably explain it in much better detail than I can, but it literally hit the nail on the head for me, because I was like, it is not helpful to see these massively opposite views. So
no. Yeah, we had a conversation about that post, and that post got a lot of traction and comments. And one of the comments was actually that weight loss cannot coexist with self-love or body acceptance. And I was like, well, I mean, you can have your opinion, but I just find that the same way when you're in diet culture and it's quite restrictive, I also find that quite restrictive. So it's an interesting topic. And the thing is, like, there's no right or wrong. And I said that on the post, like, my opinion is not right. However, I'm just speaking up for that grey area, because there's a movement that's based around positivity that's beginning to have the same kind of impact and guilt for women wanting to like work on their bodies. And it's the intention of everything. I always say that as kids.
Yeah. And like, in my opinion, health as well. So whatever health looks like to you, that's absolutely fine. And if that means doing a little bit more exercise because that makes you feel healthier, that's absolutely okay. But I also agree that, like, I can still love my body and want to move it more and want to exercise and want to lose a few pounds here and there. It's not the end of the world. So thank you for speaking up on that, because I think that was really important.
You're welcome. Thank you for showing me love on the post. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been great. And I love your podcast.
Thank you.
You don't